Welcome down to tonight's live. It's Saturday 25th of April 2020 here in the lockdown. And tonight, hopefully when he joins the chat, we're going to be welcoming Ian Campbell. There he is, right on cue. And he's just got a request to join the live feed. It's the third in our instalment of Ian. There he is. So we're going to go live. Yes. So he's just coming on now. Is it going to work? Waiting for Ian Campbell to join. Hey, how you doing, Mr. Campbell?
Hello, mate. You all right?
Yeah, good to see you.
Mm.
Yeah, how's the lockdown treating you? You all right?
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. Well, as cool as it can be.
As cool as it can be.
Yeah, I mean, I thankfully kind of half had an idea what was going to happen prior to it happening, and basically threw a load of money into reinvesting in music gear.
Which brings us on to the reason we've got you on here. So it's great to see you. So Ian Campbell, everybody, tell us a bit. You know, obviously you've done lots of things over the years in music. Tell us how you got involved in music. Take us right back to those early sort of influences and times.
So when I was little, my parents bought a piano just randomly with the idea that either I'd take to it or it was something nice to have in the house. But I just gradually and naturally started, having to play. There's always music in the house. Like my mum was a big music fan, so she was always playing stuff. And I think when I was about 9 or 10, Bruce Hornsby was quite a big thing then.
Yeah.
And for me, I decided then that I wanted to play piano. And that was pretty much it. And I started having piano lessons around about 9 years age, and then just carried on. And also when I was a kid, film was a big thing for me. I was a big film fan. I still am.
So what kind of films were you loving? What sort of things informed you?
Well, one in particular I used to watch a lot as a kid, and I don't know why, but was the 1976 remake of King Kong.
Oh, okay.
But it was more the soundtrack, and I loved the music to it. Absolutely loved it. And it wasn't until I was much older that I realised it was John Barry that actually did the music to that.
Yeah.
Who did all the Bond themes and all sorts of
legendary composer, yeah.
And he became a massive influence on me. And then I gradually sort of moved towards that kind of style of writing. Orchestral stuff, and that's pretty much kind of what I'm doing now, is sort of soundtracky, themic, game, TV, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So as you were sort of coming up, sort of in your teenage years and stuff, were you in bands? Did you join sort of bands? Tell us a bit about that.
So at school, I mean, I was in a band at school. I think we did like National Music Day in 1992. At the Milton Keynes Bowl.
Yeah.
That was an experience. And but generally, after school, I kind of floated around a bit. Wasn't quite sure what I was doing. And then I met a couple of guys who were putting a band together. They knew that I played keyboards and stuff, and just said, do you want to come try out, see what happens? And we had a couple of rehearsals. It went reasonably well, and then we kind of went from there, and then went on the floor in Peccadillos.
Yeah, so I was going to say we're talking about the Peccadillos, and for those of you who are watching that don't know, the Peccadillos were well. I'll let Ian you tell us who the Peccadillos were. You give us a bit of an insight.
On paper, we shouldn't have worked because all four of us were into all sort of different styles of music. But I don't know, something happened. I don't want to sort of coin any or throw any cliches around, but something happened once we got into the rehearsal room. We just instinctually knew what the other was doing, how things should flow. And our first few gigs were, to be honest, diabolical. We did a couple of gigs. We filmed one on some VHS thing in those days, but watched it back and it was awful. And then as a result of that, we then started changing how we wrote. And I think we did a gig early 96 up at Squires.
Yeah.
And supporting Scarfo and Linoleum. and it was basically off the back of that gig that the ball started rolling. We got noticed, and then yeah, that was basically it. Ball started rolling, and it didn't really stop.
Wow, yeah. So and obviously that was again the mid to late '90s, a really thriving time for playing in, well, not just London, but particularly London, all the venues and stuff. Tell us a bit about your experience of, as you were on the ascent, doing the whole thing leading up to signing with A&M. What was the vibe? What were good memories from that period? Good gigs and.
It was brilliant. um, it's kind of like that whole, cliches are cliche for a reason. And there's all people joke about in band camp or during the war, all those kind of things. My experience of the sort of mid to late '90s musically. Sorry, I'm just getting taken over by a cat.
Don't worry.
Yeah, my experience in the mid to late '90s doing music was fantastic. Wherever you went, there was a good vibe. Bands were all doing fairly different things. The music scene in general was vibrant, especially what was coming out of this country, not just Britpop, but
Yeah, it
the
was.
dance scene, big beat, the electronic stuff that was coming out. Everything was just buzzing. And it was a really very, very good time to be in a band in those days.
And I guess that's probably naturally the energy of all that
Mm.
all fed into what you were doing with the Peccadillos at
Yeah,
the time, I can
and
imagine.
and what you also found is that, especially, so each town sort of had a band that was doing okay. They were signed, they were on the radio. We were thankfully one of those bands, and because we were showing that we could do it, you found that quite a lot of local artists, local
We're
bands,
inspired by
were
you.
doing it as well. And we were based in a studio out of Kempston Hardwick. It's not there anymore,
Oh
but
yes, yeah, of course.
we've all of a sudden you found like there were a load of bands rehearsing, all these bands coming out, and it was really good.
Well,
And the vast majority of them were actually pretty good.
so it was
And
a
it's
good.
a big extended family as well. I mean, Neil, who managed us, he managed the Junket,
Yeah, I remember
uh,
the junket.
and Gold Rush as well, and and originally the New Bars, who were a massive influence on us as a band. And again, it's like you got kind of had this extended family, and we'd go and do gigs in London. We'd know bands in London. They'd come and see us. We'd all hang out. And it was a really good sort of a national, sort of nationwide collective of musicians.
Yeah, it was a great sort of vibe. We've got a few people watching, so hello to the people watching. I think we've got Elle and a few other people watching. So
Hello, people.
yes, this is Ian. So and so you also hands-on gigging at the time.
Mm.
We'll just briefly touch on this, not geeking out too much because I'd love to. What kind of thing was in your keyboard rig when you were going out with the Peccadillos? What was your setup?
So oh Christ, so the Moog Prodigy, and some other analog keyboards and a couple of sort of MIDI controllers. I think I had 7 or 8 keyboards,
Wow.
two of which were running off my Akai sampler. In those days you had to map samples to keys and then time stretch them and put them in
Well, I know,
arrangement,
I
all
remember.
sorts of things.
So it's quite a lot of responsibility, thinking
Yeah.
about some of the tracks on yourself to get it right when you're in a live situation.
Yeah,
Um,
and me and the drummer especially, we'd be sort of working off each other because he'd have a DAT tape machine and he'd have a click
yeah,
track on a headphone, so we'd be kind of watching each other and make sure everything's syncing up right. I mean, we used to joke that the three, so Nick, Elliot, and Pip, they come off stage, sweating their asses off, whereas I wouldn't have broken a sweat. So they used to joke about it, but mentally, what I was having to do
yeah.
was at times a nightmare. 7 or 8 keyboards, 2 keyboards were running, loads of different
Samples.
samples. I had foot triggers running as well. So it was, yeah, it's quite exhausting sometimes mentally, but
Wow.
always a brilliant buzz.
So and you had so the album was out on A&M. It was called Caught on Venus, is that right?
Yeah, Cotton
Yeah,
Venus. Yeah.
Caught on Venus. So, and that must have been a great experience making that record and going in a proper studio and
Yeah, it was. It was cool. I mean, so we went to Surrey Sound, which isn't there anymore, um, in Leatherhead, and I don't know if people know, but sometimes when you walk into studios, they'll have like discs on the wall of the artists who recorded their,
yeah, yeah,
platinum sales, all that kind of stuff. And when we walked in, I saw that the Police had done their early recordings there, which for me
wow,
was like, whoa,
yeah,
this does.
that's a vibe.
Yeah, I'm a big Police fan, so there was that, and then that whole experience was pretty cool. And as a keyboardist as well, I'd walk in and there'd be a live room with a 9 foot black grand piano just sitting there, freshly tuned, and it's like that's for you. It's like, whoa, and then I'd be like, well, I need to get Fender Rhodes or something. So the label would be like, fine, I'd hire one in. I'd be like, right, okay, so
And
can I
then you
have
had it.
this? Yeah, and just so I'd bring it in. It was just like brilliant. And in those days, everything was just much more raw. We recorded our album on tape.
Yeah,
Um, you could still smoke everywhere. So it's very much, late night sessions, bottle of Jack Daniels, packet of fags, sitting there, just doing your thing.
just
Um,
getting into the vibe of
yeah,
what track you were doing. Yeah,
yeah. It's brilliant, brilliant experience. And, we'd record until whenever, and then we go back to the house that they put us in. And in those days, it was Nintendo 64. So we go back and
Mhm.
just party up and play lots of Mario Karts. Um,
Wow. So it's a classic vibe. So as well as like being in the peccadillos and composing and performing stuff, you've done a bit of promoting as well and putting on bands yourself. How did you find that experience, and how did your stuff that you'd toured, and how did it help you book bands and do all that element as well?
Yeah, so Neil Premmett, who ran the first club for many years out of, I think originally the Angel and then the Squires, he managed our band. And after a while, I started helping Neil, like on Saturday nights, nothing too taxing, sitting on the door, doing the numbers for him, feeding the bands, just as and when. And that kind of evolved into me then putting local bands on Friday nights. And that was really with a view to like sort of letting bands showcase
Rob,
themselves. And
just saying hello to Rob Miller, who's there. Sorry.
yeah, so let the bands like showcase themselves, and and if there are any cop, and then he would then put them on as a support for like a main act on the
Yeah.
Saturday night. So it was really sort of good exposure for local artists. And we also started the sort of the original band competition, and that went really very well. And normally off the back of that, we'd get bands in studios or that kind of thing. It was a really good vibe, and I think in the early days, summer, fall came through there, and
Who became
yeah,
Don
Don
Broco? Yeah, yeah.
Broco, yeah, yeah. But the vibe was really good. It was really very very healthy.
Yeah, that's a great thing. So, and you obviously when we started the interview, so we could really well, got so many things we talk about. We might have to do a part two. Thank you so much for coming on. But what? So now you've got your set up. We're in lockdown.
Mm.
What are you up to now then, sort of composing wise? What are you hoping to do with things you're doing now? What's your as we
So the dream's always been film, TV, video games, and that's basically it. That's what I'm doing. I didn't write anything for about 10 years, and I've always promised myself that I'll get back into it. And it might sound strange, but for the last 10 years, I've been writing, but it's all been up here.
yeah, having I get you having ideas and
Um, and for the last few weeks now, it's all just been come flooding out, which is nice because there's always a worry that you kind of get writer's block. But literally, every day I'm sitting there and it's just stuff just flying out of my brain.
so this is like it's really exciting stuff to hear this in. So are people gonna be able to get to hear this on some kind of platform? Are you gonna
Yeah, yeah,
what's
yeah.
your
I've got. I mean, I've got a SoundCloud page set up. At the moment, it's only I think one track on there at the moment.
what's it called? Is it just Ian Campbell or what's
Yeah, yeah. It's just my name.
yeah?
Um, but as I build a body up, work up, that will sort of expand naturally. and then we'll just see what happens. Really,
Yeah, I
I'm
mean
not
that's
putting, I'm not putting any, I'm not putting too much pressure on myself.
yeah. I mean, I'm kind of if there is anything positive to come out of this lockdown and the whole situation we're in at the moment, maybe it might shake something up in a music sense, and you'll be able to you'll see things come out of this situation.
Yeah,
That's I'm kind of hoping.
yeah,
As
yeah,
a,
yeah, possibly. But again, we'll see what happens. I mean, the one thing about when you get a record deal, it takes something away from the love of your music.
that's yes, it's
Um,
interesting to hear this actually. Yeah, so
it's that whole thing about when your passion becomes a job, something gets lost.
and there's expectation, I guess, from you because a lot of money's been invested in you.
Yeah,
So it's kind of what's
that's
happening. Yeah,
exactly it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, no, it's great. So obviously, as we all know, sort of music ebbs and flows and stuff. Are you? It's had great points in the last 30 years, and it's also had more not so great points. Like everything up and down. Are you seeing anything coming round now that Are you seeing any hints of greatness or things, or is the best stuff on the underground, or how are you feeling about that?
I'm not sure at the moment, to be honest. Excuse me. There's I mean, it's one artist in particular who I'm a little bit obsessed with. Um, been around a few years, but I think the next couple of years he's really going to become quite a thing and well
And
known.
who's that?
His name's John Hopkins.
John Hopkins. Okay, yeah.
And he's got he writes music quite organically. He has a piano and stuff, and it's a kind of he'll do very nice sort of piano-y stuff, but also quite dirty electronic music as well.
Cool.
And yeah, he's proper good, proper good.
Well, I'll definitely have to check him out.
But yeah, I think we'll see let's see what happens over the next few months
Yeah,
once.
it's going to be interesting times. But Ian, thank you for taking part in this and being one of our interviewees. And yeah, is
Thanks
anything
for
else you'd
having me.
like to? No, it's great. Is anything you'd like to say just as a closing? Hi, Michael Green, watching. Anything you'd want to say just on anything, life, yourself, what's happened, and
No, just what I always say: never rub another man's rhubarb.
that's very true. Well, you heard it, guys. Never rub another man's rhubarb. Ian, thank you so much for taking part in this.
Okay, mate.
And yeah, I'll speak to you soon. And yeah, thank you ever so much.
All right, mate.
Good, mate. See you later.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Ta-da. Bye.
Bye.